There comes a moment in every soul's journey where the noise of life becomes louder than the voice of purpose. You smile on the outside, but inside you're screaming. You're surrounded by people, yet you feel completely unseen. You pray, but it feels like your words hit the ceiling and fall back into your lap as tears. But I came to tell you something today. God is still talking, not in the thunder, not in the earthquake, not always in the fire. Sometimes he's speaking in a whisper just like he did with Elijah. Sometimes he's walking beside you in the stillness just like he did with Enoch. And just because you're hurting doesn't mean you're disqualified. Just because you're feeling low doesn't mean God has stepped away. What if I told you the negative feelings aren't signs of your failure? They're signs of your calling. What if I told you the storm that's been trying to break you is the very thing God is using to build you? Enoch didn't escape the world, he walked with God through it, and today God is calling you into that same kind of walk, not just a moment in church, not just a scripture on a Sunday, but a daily, deep, consistent relationship that silences your inner critic and speaks life over your weary soul. You don't have to stay stuck in your emotions. You don't have to live under the weight of anxiety, fear, or shame. You can rise, you can hear him, you can walk with him, because the same God who walked Enoch into glory is the same God who's whispering your name right now. Let's talk about how to overcome the weight of what you're feeling and step into the life God's calling you to walk in. There's this subtle but dangerous lie many of us have swallowed without realizing it, the lie that God only speaks to us when we are spiritually perfect, emotionally strong, or mentally clear. That somehow his voice gets quieter when our faith is shaky, our hearts are heavy, and our minds are battling storms. But that's not the God of Enoch. That's not the God of Scripture. That's not the God who calls himself Emmanuel, God with us. See, God doesn't stop speaking just because you stop listening. He doesn't fall silent when your soul feels foggy. His voice is not reactive to your condition. His voice is consistent in his covenant. God talked with Enoch not because Enoch had everything figured out, but because Enoch walked in relationship. Enoch's walk wasn't perfect, but it was persistent, and persistence is what creates spiritual intimacy. The Bible says Enoch walked with God, not that Enoch sprinted, not that he floated above trials, not that he was always joyful and full of faith, but that he walked, step by step, day by day, moment by moment. Through emotions, through confusion, through joy, through pain. His walk was evidence of constant communion, not conditional confidence. And that's where many of us get stuck. We think our inconsistencies disqualify us from conversation with God. But what if I told you that the conversation never stopped? What if I told you that even in your most silent, broken, frustrated moments, God was still whispering? Some of the most powerful moments of divine instruction don't come when we're speaking in tongues or shouting from a pulpit. They come when we're lying awake at night, tears on our pillow, wondering if we're seen. And in that darkness, in that vulnerability, in that quiet desperation, he leans in and says, "Yes, I'm still here. I never left. I'm still talking. Are you listening?" See, when God speaks, he doesn't speak into perfection. He speaks into purpose. And that means your emotional state doesn't determine his volume. He spoke to Moses through a burning bush while Moses was running from his past. He spoke to Jonah while he was trying to escape his assignment. He spoke to Elijah while he was hiding in a cave begging to die. He spoke to Saul on his way to kill Christians, and he spoke to Hagar when she was alone, pregnant, and running from abuse. What do all of them have in common? None of them were in the right frame of mind. None of them were emotionally okay. None of them were sitting in church, hands lifted, hearts pure. They were tired. They were scared. They were ashamed. They were overwhelmed, and yet he still spoke. So who told you that God stopped talking to you because you've been anxious lately? Who told you that your depression disqualified you from divine downloads? Who convinced you that the weight of your emotional battles meant God was on pause? Because that's not Bible. That's not truth. That's trauma trying to interpret theology. That's your past trying to rewrite God's pattern. But if God was only present in perfection, none of us would ever hear him. The real issue is not that God isn't talking, it's that many of us don't recognize his voice in unfamiliar tones. We're looking for thunder, but he's whispering in quiet. We're expecting peace, but he's speaking through pain. We're waiting for comfort, but he's calling us through discomfort. We think divine conversation only happens in safe, sanitized, sacred moments. But what if I told you God was using your unrest to draw you closer? What if I told you he was using your confusion to birth clarity? What if the very chaos you've been trying to silence was actually the backdrop for a deeper, more intimate relationship with the Father? When Enoch walked with God, it wasn't because life was perfect, it was because the presence was consistent. And in your own walk, you have to begin to practice that same spiritual persistence. Not waiting until your emotions catch up with your faith, but learning to press in when your feelings are out of alignment. Because feelings are fleeting, they're fragile, they're valid, but they are not final. And if you only talk to God on your good days, you'll miss the richness of who he wants to be for you on your worst ones. God doesn't just speak to perform, he speaks to transform. He speaks to shift you from internal torment to internal truth. But the issue is that some of us have allowed our emotions to become such loud voices that they drown out the still small whisper of God. And so now the voice that says, "You're not enough," feels more familiar than the voice that says, "You are my beloved." The voice that reminds you of your failures gets more attention than the voice that calls you forgiven. The voice of anxiety is louder than the voice of peace. But that doesn't mean God has stopped speaking. It means your inner frequency needs to shift. You've got to tune your spirit to pick up the sound of grace even when guilt is screaming. You've got to train your heart to listen for divine affirmation even when shame is trying to narrate your identity. The enemy isn't just attacking your life, he's attacking your ear. Because if he can distort what you hear, he can manipulate how you think. And if he can control how you think, he can paralyze your purpose. That's why the word says, faith comes by hearing. Because what you hear becomes the foundation of what you believe. So even when the enemy sends a flood of emotions, God is still speaking. He's still inviting. He's still confirming. He's still calling. And sometimes his words won't always make your emotions disappear immediately, but they'll give you the strength to walk through them without being destroyed by them. Because when God speaks, he doesn't always calm the storm around you sometimes. He calms the storm within you. And that is the kind of walk Enoch had, a walk that allowed him to live above the noise, because he was tuned into the voice. And today, that same invitation is being extended to you, not based on your perfection, not based on your feelings, but based on God's unwavering desire to be near you, to walk with you, to speak to you, to lead you into places where fear can't follow, and where negative emotions lose their power in the presence of the one who created your soul. We live in a world that has taught us to either suppress our emotions or be ruled by them. Most of us were never shown how to sit with our feelings without becoming them. We weren't taught how to feel pain without drowning in it. We weren't taught how to acknowledge fear without surrendering to it. And so, over time, we began to give emotions a throne they were never meant to sit on. We let feelings become dictators, rulers, commanders of our decision, making our faith, our confidence, our self-worth. But what if I told you they were never meant to be masters? What if I told you they were just messengers trying to tell you something important? You see, emotions are not evil. They're not sinful. They're not weak. They're signals. They're whispers from the soul, indicators that something deeper is going on beneath the surface. When you feel anger rising, it's not just to make you explode, it's trying to say, something feels unfair. When anxiety tightens your chest, it's not just to make you panic, it's trying to say, there's uncertainty and I don't feel safe. When sadness creeps in, it's not just to weigh you down, it's saying, I lost something and it mattered to me. But the problem is, we've spent so much time trying to silence the emotions that we've missed the message, and when you don't understand the message, you either suppress it or let it control you. You either bury it alive in the back of your heart, or you allow it to hijack the steering wheel of your life. But either way, you become disconnected from your soul. You start walking around not knowing why you're lashing out, why you can't commit, why you keep sabotaging every opportunity, while you get triggered by certain words or certain people or certain situations. And you think it's just how you are, but really, it's just unprocessed emotions that were meant to deliver a message and leave, but instead they were crowned kings and took up permanent residence. And I want you to understand emotions were designed to move through you, not to define you. Feelings were never meant to be the authors of your future. Just because you feel fear doesn't mean you're supposed to bow to it. Just because you feel rejected doesn't mean you are unlovable. Just because you feel like quitting doesn't mean the call on your life has expired. Emotions are temporary states, not permanent truths. They are waves, not foundations. They rise, they fall, they shift, but your identity, your purpose, your worth, and your calling remain fixed in God. But the enemy knows how powerful your emotions can be if you don't know what to do with them. He doesn't even have to attack your destiny directly. All he has to do is manipulate how you feel about yourself. If he can make you feel unworthy, you'll start behaving like you are. If he can make you feel stuck, you'll stop trying. If he can make you feel unloved, you'll reject healthy relationships. That's why guarding your heart isn't just about relationships, it's about protecting the space where your emotions live. Because if the enemy can plant lies in your emotions, he'll gain access to the decisions you make and the life you build. And here's the truth that some people don't want to admit: you can't always control how you feel. Sometimes the trauma is deeper than your willpower. Sometimes the sadness is layered, ancient, generational. Sometimes the fear doesn't make sense on paper, but it's real in your bones, and that's okay. You're human, but what you can control is what you do with those feelings. You can choose not to ignore them, not to shame them, but to invite God into them. You can look that anxiety in the face and say, "You're not my ruler. You're just a signal. Let me find out what needs healing." You can feel sadness and still show up for your purpose. You can feel anger and still speak with grace. You can be afraid and still walk in obedience. That is what emotional maturity looks like, not the absence of emotions, but the ability to handle them without letting them handle you. When Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he felt overwhelmed. He said, "My soul is sorrowful unto death." He was sweating drops of blood, overcome with the weight of what he was about to endure, and yet he still said, "Not my will, but yours be done." That means even Jesus, in his humanity, felt deeply, but he was not controlled by those feelings. He processed them in prayer, he named them, he brought them before God, and he still walked out his purpose. What does that teach us? It teaches us that feeling something deeply is not a sign of weakness, it's a part of walking in purpose. Some of the most anointed people still cry, still doubt, still wake up wondering if they're strong enough. But they don't live there. They don't unpack in those feelings. They don't build their identity in their temporary struggle. They allow emotions to pass through, deliver their message, and make room for God's truth to take root. You might be in a season where everything in you feels tired, numb, or overwhelmed. You're doing your best, but you still feel like something's off. And I want you to pause and ask yourself, what are my emotions trying to tell me? Not shame them, not suppress them, but listen and then submit them to the voice of God, because your emotions don't get the final word. God does. He's the anchor when your mood shifts. He's the stability when your feelings are unstable. He's the reminder of truth when your emotions start lying to you. You don't have to deny what you feel to walk in faith. You just have to decide that what you feel will not determine who you are. Emotions may visit, but they cannot build. They can knock on the door, but they don't get a key. They can be acknowledged, but they don't get to vote, because your emotions, while real and valid, are not always right. And if you give them the steering wheel, they will always drive you in circles around the same mountain, the same trauma, the same broken cycles. But if you learn to hear them and then hand them to God, you'll begin to walk in a new kind of freedom, a freedom that says, "I feel it, but it doesn't own me." A freedom that declares, "I am not my emotions, I am God's child, and his truth is greater than my current mood." And in that place, you begin to regain your authority. You begin to move from reaction to revelation. You begin to remember that your emotions are not enemies, they're just trying to show you where healing needs to happen. There comes a time in every believer's life where you have to make a decision to detach not from your calling, not from your purpose, not from your God, but from everything that keeps you grounded in places God never called you to stay. You cannot walk with heaven while clinging to what hell used to feed you. There is a tension between elevation and attachment, and the deeper you go with God, the more you realize that the weight that holds you down is often disguised as comfort. The familiar is seductive, the predictable is safe, but the walk of Enoch, the walk that led to communion so powerful it carried him out of this realm, was not grounded in comfort. It was grounded in complete detachment from what others refused to release. There is something about letting go that heaven responds to, the kind of letting go that confuses the people around you, the kind that doesn't make sense on paper, the kind that makes you walk away from environments that still entertain you but no longer feed you, the kind that makes you say no to opportunities that feed your ego but starve your spirit. That's the kind of detachment that draws heaven close. See, we often think elevation is about gaining more, but in the kingdom of God, elevation is often about releasing more. It's about subtracting until only obedience remains. Enoch walked with God because he was willing to walk away from what distracted others. He was willing to walk with no applause, no crowds, no titles, no Instagram bio, just the raw pursuit of God for no other reason but to know Him. And that level of pursuit requires a ruthless detachment from the noise, from the opinions, from the performance, from the pressure. It requires saying, God, if it's not you, I don't want it. If it doesn't carry your scent, I'll leave it behind. If it steals my peace, I won't make space for it anymore. But most of us don't realize how deeply entangled we are. We don't just hold on to people, we hold on to identities. We hold on to how things used to be. We hold on to labels we picked up in childhood. We hold on to wounds because they became part of our story. We hold on to survival mindsets that kept us safe in one season but now sabotage us in the next. We hold on because letting go means stepping into the unknown, and the unknown is terrifying when you don't trust that God will meet you there. But Enoch trusted. He trusted enough to keep walking, trusted enough to lose track of the world's pace and find rhythm in the divine. He detached from earthly systems that told him how he should live, what he should value, what success looked like, what religion required. And in that detachment, he didn't become less grounded, he became more connected to heaven. Because when you let go of everything that was tying your soul to the temporal, you become free to hear the eternal. We're not just talking about physical detachment. This is about internal detachment, detachment from the lies that have governed your thinking, detachment from the shame that's been speaking over your decisions, detachment from the scarcity mindset that told you you're always one mistake away from being disqualified. You've been holding on to fear like it's your identity, holding on to rejection like it's your resume, holding on to trauma like it's your legacy, but God is calling you to detach so you can ascend. There is no ascension without separation, and sometimes God can't elevate you because you're too entangled with what's beneath you. Detachment is a form of faith, faith that says, I don't need this anymore, I don't need their approval, I don't need to be understood, I don't need to explain why I'm moving differently. I'm just walking with God, and where He's taking me, not everything can come with me. That kind of faith requires spiritual maturity, the kind that says, I'd rather be misunderstood by people than misaligned with God, the kind that chooses purpose over popularity, the kind that chooses clarity over chaos, the kind that says, I'm no longer willing to be a prisoner to what used to hold me. Some of us are so emotionally attached to our dysfunction that we defend it like it's part of our identity. We say things like, this is just who I am, when really, it's just what life taught us. It's just the way pain shaped us, but heaven doesn't walk with the version of you that's loyal to dysfunction. Heaven walks with the version of you that dares to detach the version that says, I'm ready to unbecome everything that wasn't built in truth. That's when the divine begins to echo through your life. That's when heaven begins to lean in and reveal secrets, instructions, alignment. We wonder why we can't hear clearly. We wonder why we feel far from God. But often, it's not that God stopped speaking, it's that we're still holding on to frequencies He never called us to, still tuned into conversations that dilute our faith, still participating in cycles that confuse our identity. And until we detach, we can't discern. Until we let go, we can't level up. Until we cut the tie, we can't climb. The climb requires clarity. The walk with God isn't crowded. It's costly. You'll have to leave some people behind. You'll have to grieve some versions of yourself. You'll have to outgrow your own history. But the presence you gain is worth the pieces you lose. Detachment doesn't mean you stop loving people. It means you stop letting what's unhealthy lead you. It means you create space for God to fill instead of trying to keep everything in your own control. Detachment is surrender, and surrender is what heaven responds to. God is not impressed by our performance, he's moved by our release. When you finally unclench your fists, when you finally stop dragging dead weight, when you finally lay down what was never yours to carry, that's when you create room for heaven to walk with you like it walked with Enoch. Because it's not about how fast you walk, it's not about how spiritual you look. It's about how willing you are to let go, to be stripped of status, stripped of ego, stripped of control, and still walk in obedience. Still walk when it's quiet, still walk when it's lonely, still walk when it costs you the comfort of what you used to cling to. That's the walk Enoch had, that's the walk God is calling you to. A walk that invites glory, not because of who you are, but because of what you're willing to release. There's a breaking that doesn't mean you're being destroyed, it means you're being prepared. And sometimes what looks like punishment is actually process. But when life starts stripping things away, when prayers seem unanswered, when every door you knock on remains shut, it's hard not to wonder, God, what did I do wrong? We've been conditioned to believe that pain is a result of punishment. That hardship is heaven's way of scolding us, that every tear we cry is somehow the harvest of a seed we never meant to plant. But that's not the truth. That's not the voice of your Father. That's the voice of fear disguising itself as theology. That's the voice of trauma trying to explain what only revelation can. You are not being punished, you are being processed, and process never feels pretty. It doesn't always come with understanding. It rarely comes with warning and almost never comes with applause, because process doesn't work in public. It works in private, in the quiet, in the dark. It works in the nights when you can't sleep. In the mornings when you wake up with a weight you can't name. In the middle of a smile when your soul is still aching. It works behind the scenes while everyone else sees your posture, but only God sees your breaking. See, punishment is rooted in anger, but process is rooted in purpose. Punishment is about consequences, but process is about creation. The potter doesn't slam the clay on the wheel because he's angry he does it, because he's shaping something that's never been seen before. And when God allows the shaking, the stripping, the pressing, it's not to destroy your design, it's to bring it out. It's to refine what's already been placed in you. You were already chosen, already called, already marked, but that calling has to be tested, matured, deepened. And that only happens in process. But the danger is when we confuse the weight of the process for the wrath of God. When we start believing that our suffering is a sign of separation. That because we're going through, we must be doing something wrong. That because we feel broken, we must be broken beyond repair. But that's not how heaven sees you. Heaven isn't punishing you, heaven is pruning you. God is cutting back the dead branches, trimming the parts of you that no longer serve your future. He's making room for new fruit, new growth, new glory, and pruning always feels like loss before it looks like life. When Joseph was thrown into the pit, falsely accused, imprisoned, and forgotten, it wasn't punishment, it was process. Every level of loss was leading him closer to the throne. Every betrayal was positioning him for elevation. Every delay was a part of divine design. But I wonder what he felt like in the waiting. I wonder how many nights he cried, wondering if God had forgotten him. I wonder if he ever thought, was that dream even real? Did I miss it? Because when the process is long, the mind will start playing tricks. It'll start replaying every mistake. It'll start highlighting your flaws. It'll try to convince you that you're the reason things are falling apart. But beloved, let me speak to that wounded part of you. This is not your fault. This is not because you are unworthy. This is not because you prayed the wrong way or didn't fast enough or didn't believe hard enough. This is process, and process is messy, but it's also holy. It's sacred, because process is where you meet God in ways you never would have if everything had gone according to plan. It's where your roots go deeper, where your faith is no longer built on blessings but on truth, where your identity is no longer wrapped in what you do but in who you are and whose you are, and process doesn't always show you progress. That's what makes it hard. You can be growing and still feel stuck. You can be healing and still feel broken. You can be obedient and still feel overlooked. But don't let the absence of outward signs make you doubt the internal work. Just because you can't see the fruit yet doesn't mean the seed isn't taking root. God is doing something in the hidden place, in the silence, in the stretch, in the discomfort. He's preparing you for what you prayed for and protecting you from what you can't yet carry. Because the truth is, some doors haven't opened not because you're not ready for the blessing, but because the blessing isn't ready for the version of you who's still attached to old wounds. God knows what you're capable of carrying. He knows the weight of your destiny, and He won't put something holy in hands that still bleed from unhealed places. So He lets the fire come. He lets the wilderness last a little longer. He lets you sit in the ache not to harm you, but to heal you. To detox you from everything that tried to convince you that you needed to earn love, that you needed to perform to be accepted, that you needed to strive to be seen. In the process, God is reminding you you were already chosen. Not after you got it right, not after you healed, not after you cleaned up. You were chosen before the foundation of the world. You were loved before the mistake. You were seen before the fall. And now, in this season of breaking, He's simply bringing you back to that original truth. He's breaking off everything that distorted your view, everything that dimmed your light, everything that compromised your identity, because where He's taking you, you can't afford to carry lies. You can't afford to carry guilt. You can't afford to carry a broken self-concept. That's why it hurts. That's why it feels like loss, because anything that isn't rooted in truth must go. Anything that won't survive the next level must fall off. Process is God protecting your future by preparing your present. And while it may not feel like love, it is the most radical form of love. A father who refuses to let you settle, who refuses to let you self-destruct, who refuses to let you miss your moment, and so He allows the fire, not to burn you but to refine you, to make you come out like gold. And while the enemy tries to tell you you're being punished, heaven is rejoicing because process is proof that God is still invested in you. He hasn't given up on you. He hasn't let you go. He hasn't walked away. The very fact that you're in process means He's still working, still shaping, still forming, still loving. The pressure you feel is not rejection, it's refinement. It's the evidence that God is near, working all things together, even the parts you don't understand yet. When you walk with God, storms don't disappear, they just lose their authority to define you. They may still come, the winds may still blow, the waves may still rise, but your posture changes, your response shifts, your identity stops being tossed by what's around you because you've become anchored by who is within you. That's the transformation that happens when you walk with God, not a life without struggle, but a spirit that refuses to sink under it. Enoch didn't get carried away because he avoided the chaos of the world. He was carried away because he learned to walk through it untouched. That's the secret most people miss. You don't have to remove yourself from the world to have peace. You don't need to escape the noise to hear clearly. You need to learn how to walk so closely with God that the volume of the storm never drowns out the whisper of His voice. Most people walk to God. They visit. They come when there's trouble. They come when there's a crisis. And God, in His grace, still meets them there, but Enoch walked with God, not occasionally, not when things were falling apart. He walked consistently, daily, intimately. He didn't just pray when the storm hit. He built such deep connection that by the time the storm showed up, his soul was already anchored. His rhythm wasn't disrupted. His spirit wasn't shaken. He had peace before the panic. He had direction before the detour. He had assurance before the attack. That's the kind of walk God is calling you into, one where your trust is no longer conditional, one where your faith isn't seasonal, one where your peace isn't based on outcomes but rooted in presence. Because the truth is, storms are part of life: emotional storms, mental storms, relational storms, spiritual storms. And if your peace is only active in calm weather, you'll live your whole life in survival mode, waiting for things to settle so you can finally breathe. But God didn't design you to survive storms. He designed you to carry peace through them. Walking with God doesn't make you numb to what's happening. It makes you anchored in what's eternal. You can still feel the rain, but you don't panic like you used to. You can still feel the thunder, but it doesn't shake you to your core. Why? Because you know something now. You've been through enough to learn that storms don't break you when God walks with you. They reveal you. They reveal what's rooted. They reveal what's real. They reveal what's still wounded and what's been healed. Some of us have been measuring our faith by how much we avoid pain. But real faith isn't proven in avoidance, it's revealed in endurance. It's shown in your ability to keep walking even when the wind is howling, to keep believing when the answers don't come, to keep worshiping when the walls don't fall, to keep showing up to purpose when your emotions beg you to quit. That's walking with God, not a faith that feels good, but a faith that holds firm. When Jesus was in the boat with the disciples and the storm came, they panicked. They thought they were going to drown. But Jesus was sleeping, and when they woke him, he asked them why they had such little faith. He wasn't upset that the storm came. He was surprised that they forgot who was in the boat. That's what storms do. They test what you know. They test whether your peace was based on the presence of calm or the presence of Christ. And for many of us, this is the season where God is teaching us to rest in the boat, to rest even when the waves rise. To rest even when you can't see the shore, because if God is in it, you will not drown. If God is in it, you will not be destroyed. If God is in it, you don't have to understand the wind to know you're safe in his hand. Walking with God teaches you that protection doesn't always look like prevention. Sometimes protection is endurance. Sometimes it's the grace to stay sane in the middle of chaos. Sometimes it's the power to forgive what still hurts. Sometimes it's the clarity to see the lesson when others only see the loss. That's what divine partnership does. It gives you access to a perspective that fear can't touch. There's something unexplainable about walking with God through pain. It doesn't mean you don't cry. It means you don't crumble. It doesn't mean you don't feel fear. It means fear doesn't become your narrative. It doesn't mean you don't get tired. It means you learn to rest in his presence, not retreat into shame. And the more you walk, the more you learn how to listen not just with your ears, but with your spirit. You begin to recognize his voice in places you used to only hear panic. You begin to discern his peace in situations where you used to fall apart. You begin to carry stillness into rooms that once triggered your trauma. You begin to pray not out of desperation but from authority. You begin to speak with clarity instead of confusion. You begin to navigate storms as if they don't own you, because they don't. You are walking with the one who commands them. You are walking with the one who made the sea, but that walk doesn't come overnight. It's cultivated, it's developed, it's fought for in the quiet places. It's built in obedience, in surrender, in those daily moments where you choose God even when emotions scream louder, even when disappointment sits heavy, even when nothing makes sense. You walk anyway. You choose him anyway, you talk to him anyway, and little by little your walk becomes your weapon. Your walk becomes your peace. Your walk becomes your protection. Your walk becomes your power. There are things you'll never overcome until you walk close enough with God to see them differently. There are storms that won't stop, but they'll lose their grip. There are wounds that may still ache, but they'll no longer define your steps. There are moments that used to trigger you, but now they teach you. Because when God becomes your companion, even the storm becomes your classroom, even the pain becomes your teacher, even the loss becomes a portal to deeper revelation. God is not calling you to escape life. He's calling you to walk through it differently, to walk through it with power, with presence, with perspective, with peace that surpasses understanding, peace that doesn't depend on the forecast, peace that doesn't need validation, peace that walks into the storm and doesn't flinch. Because when you walk with God, you don't need the storm to stop. You just need to know who you're walking with.